My name's Maria, and I'm an introvert. Large groups of people, super loud parties, and being the center of attention, no thanks. I know I don't sound like the kind of girl who goes out and drinks a lot, yet I'm often drunk. Can you believe it? And turns out, drunk me is a complete nightmare. Cringe. It all started a few years ago when my best friend Kimberly had a pajama party for her birthday. I was nervous about it, as there were girls going that I didn't know. But I didn't want to let my bestie down, so I went along. We had dinner first, deep pan pizza and cheese fries. Yum. Then suddenly my behavior turned weird. I couldn't stop laughing at every little thing. Then I ran around the house pretending to be an airplane and hung my head out of the window and started waving to complete strangers who passed by. I don't remember any of this though, but one of the girls videoed me and uploaded it to her social media page. The next day at school, everyone was pointing and laughing at me. Turns out the video had gone viral. I just couldn't figure out why I'd acted like that. It was so out of character for me. Then things got worse. Way worse. Once I'd finished my lunch in the school canteen, and 15 minutes later, as I walked out of there, I began to feel lightheaded. A girl who often gave me dirty looks passed me, and I slurred out, "What are you looking at?" Then I slapped her. This girl saw red, so she hit me back. A teacher had to pull us apart, and I was sent to the principal's office. He accused me of being drunk and summoned my mom. As you can imagine, my mom was furious. She grounded me for a whole month and cut off all my pocket money, as she'd thought I'd use them to buy alcohol. I told her I hadn't drunk any alcohol, but she didn't believe me. I was so confused. I didn't understand why these weird things were happening. I just wanted a quiet life, so why did my personality suddenly change? Then it's my younger sister's birthday. About 10 minutes after eating a piece of fruitcake, I suddenly began to sweat and felt dizzy. I started to laugh for no reason, chatted out a load of nonsense, then fell off my seat. Everyone was staring at me with confusion. Finally, my mom realized that something was up with me. She took me to see loads of specialists, but they were all clueless. Then, finally, a specialist gave me a diagnosis. Turns out I have a rare condition known as Brewery syndrome. This causes the digestive system to automatically endogenously ferment. Then, when I consume sugars or starches, these produce alcohol, which make the body drunk. To curb such sudden bouts of drunkenness, I had to drastically cut down on sugary and starchy foods and take medication. As you can imagine, not being able to eat these types of foods was not fun at all. I like candy and chocolate, and I love pretzels, which also happen to be one of the most starch-filled foods out there. Talk about a bummer. Over 2 years of living with this condition, I've gotten used to it. I've discovered food substitutes, such as veggie fries and paleo bread. It can be a hassle in restaurants, as I hate being seen as the awkward customer with a long list of demands. But it was always not that bad, since I eventually knew how to control my sugar input. So I guess I learned how to be a normal teen and lead a fairly normal life. Well, at least until I ended up with a massive crush on a cute boy from my class called Scott. Being the shy girl I am, I can't imagine ever telling him how I felt. But I figured that my rare syndrome could help me do just that. So at Kimberly's birthday party, when Scott passed me a piece of gooey chocolate cake, I took it from him and ate it. I soon started to feel more confident. And before long, I dared to request songs and confidently sing in front of people. I chose to sing the Harry Styles song, Adore You, and I dedicated it to my amazing bestie, Kimberly. But while I sang it, I looked over at Scott. Later that night, Scott messaged me to ask if I was home yet. Then we talked more. But the next day, when Scott called out to me in the corridor, I only dared to shyly greet him with an awkward smile. Lack of yeast, I returned to my usual shy girl self. Then, during my English lit lesson, the teacher grouped me with Scott to perform a Shakespeare classic. He was playing Romeo and asked if I wanted to play Juliet. Oh, for a shy, quiet, and stuttering girl like me, performing in front of a whole class seemed unimaginable. But I didn't want anyone else from our group playing Juliet, so I plucked up the courage to say yes. So, before every rehearsal and, of course, the official performance, I ate some candies. The performance was very successful, and afterward, Scott asked me to go to his friend's birthday party with him. I was super worried, but then I thought if I got a little drunk off food, everything would be fine. During the party, I was so nervous and longed for the confidence that I ate a bit too much candies and fruits, as I often did. I usually knew how much to eat so I could remain in control of my actions, but my nerves caused me to overdo it. The rest of the night was a blur, but Scott told me I was laughing like crazy, walking unsteadily, and I even wrapped my arms around his friend Freddie's neck and kissed him on the cheek, which caused Freddie's girlfriend to slap me in front of everyone. Even though Scott was mad at me, he still took me home. I tried slurring out an apology to him, but I was so drunk I ended up vomiting all over his lap. Talk about embarrassing. Still, being the sweet guy he is, he walked me inside and my mom took me straight to bed. Then she explained my condition to him. When we next spoke, he was really understanding about it and told me that he liked me just the way I am and that I didn't need to eat bad foods to feel more confident. I know I was wrong to abuse my condition. The drunk, confident version of me is a reckless mess, but I don't want to be her anymore. It's hard sometimes, especially as I find social events so awkward and uncomfortable. But I know I need to follow the doctor's instructions to manage my condition. Now I'm trying to build up my self-esteem instead of relying on false bursts of confidence that starchy foods give me. I know it isn't going to be easy, but now I realize that there are plenty of people out there that like me for me.
Hey there, I'm Connor, and something really creepy happened to me, so I'm going to tell you all about it. I have to warn you though, it's on the spooky side. So there's a chance it may freak you out so much you have to sleep with the lights on. There's also a chance you won't believe me, and that's up to you, but please remember that this is real for me. I believe in this stuff, and always have. In fact, I've been obsessed with the afterlife since I was little. I used to have open dreams, where strangers would come and try to connect with me. It was often ambiguous that I barely saw their faces. All I could remember after awakening was just a shadowy or indistinct shape with strange gestures, like a message. When I told my parents about them, my mom made it out that it was all nonsense, but my grandma assured me that there might be some spirits trying to tell me something. She told me not to worry, as most spirits had no intention of causing me harm. Sometimes these spirits would tell me things. Once, one appeared with a dog. Then a month later, my dad came home with a puppy. Then another time, I dreamt that Grandma had passed away. I didn't dare to tell anyone about that dream. I was so scared it would come true. Then, you guessed it, a few months later, she died. I came to dread those dreams, and worst of all, now I didn't have Grandma to confide in about them. To be fair, as I grew older, the dreams stopped, but my fascination with the afterlife didn't. I knew not to mess around with this kind of stuff, as doing so was bad news. Grandma had always told me that. But then I started dating Jennifer, and I really wanted to show her this side to the world. So I bought a Ouija board from Amazon. Well, it's a flat board with letters and numbers on it that's used as a gateway to the spirit world. I knew the rules. Never try this at home, as that was asking for trouble. The last thing I needed was to unleash a poltergeist or something worse in my house. Also, never ask the spirit to show themselves. So the plan was to sneak into the old house in my neighborhood that had just sold and was currently empty. I told Jennifer about my plan. She'd never done anything like this before, and although she was skeptical, she was also excited. That's what I love about her. She's so brave and adventurous. We met in the house's front yard at 3 a.m. as we planned, and both of us were seriously in the mood when we were trying to break into it. Yeah, I know, this sounds bad. But we didn't want to make a mess of the place or anything, we just wanted somewhere empty where we could test out the board. Firstly, we set the mood by lighting candles, incense, and burning sage. Before I started, I grabbed Jennifer's hand and said out loud, "Please don't show up, evil forces." Then I placed a silver coin on the board to deter bad spirits. Then we both placed our index fingers on the planchette, which is a movable pointer, and took a deep breath. I called out into the darkness, "Is anyone there? If spirits are living here, please talk to us." Nothing. Not even the slightest bit of wind. Jennifer laughed, and this annoyed me. I suppose she could tell from my face that I was mad. So she smiled at me and said, "I'm sorry, let's try again." Then placed her finger back. Then I said, "If there's anyone there, we would like to make contact." I was getting goosebumps right at that moment, and the wind started to pick up. The stillness broke, and the darkness around us seemed to move. Excited, I yelled out, "Is anyone there?" Then it got super crazy. Like it was this scene from a movie with dirt swirling around us. The planchette started moving slowly. Jennifer looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" "It's not me, I promise," I replied. I looked up at her, and the moment our eyes met, we knew the planchette was moving by itself. I continued asking, "How many spirits are there?" It took a minute of silence for the planchette to move to 1. It was becoming interesting. "Are you a good spirit?" It moved faster. Youguess. Okay, I considered it a yes, and continued questioning it on some simpler things. "Can I know your name?" The answer was Sameasher. At this point, I could hear Jennifer freak out. It was kind of creepy because I didn't call her name even once. I said, "If you're really here, prove it." Jennifer jumped up. "Hey, we promised not to ever ask it to prove its appearance." Suddenly, a gust of wind came out of nowhere and blew out one of the candles. Jennifer yelled at me to stop this now. Then she ran out of there. I quickly said to the spirit, "Nice to know you, but it's time for us to go. Goodbye." And at the same time swept the planchette over the goodbye symbol on the board to quit. Then I picked up the stuff and chased after Jennifer to check if she was okay. She was completely freaked out and told me she was never doing that again. The problem was, I couldn't stop thinking about the spirit. The new owners would soon move into the house, so I didn't have many opportunities left to go back there. So 1 week later, again at 3 a.m., I persuaded my daredevil friends Austin and Miguel to meet me there. I set the board up, and we began. I asked a few questions, and nothing happened at first. Then after a while, the board kept pointing out meaningless letters. I actually thought it was the others messing about. They soon got bored and all thought it was just my imagination all the time. Feeling annoyed, Austin left to go to the toilet, and Miguel and I carried on. I believed in my previous experience, so I persistently continued asking, "Do you know who's in the toilet now?" But still the board only gave out random numbers. When Austin came back, Miguel gave Austin the numbers we'd recorded and said that this time it might not work and we should just go. The color drained from his face. It turns out the numbers were his own social security number. Austin began accusing this of being a setup. I told him it wasn't. I guess he was curious as he sat back down and joined in. And that's when Miguel asked a stupid question. "How much longer is this loser Connor kid alive?" I gave him a dirty look and said, "I told you not to joke around." Then the planchette started moving, stopping on the number 1, then 0. 10 years. I only have 10 years left. This was awful. I was too young to die in just 10 years' time. But no, the planchette continued to move. And to my horror, I watched it go between the letters D-A-Y-S. "Quit it, guys. This isn't funny," I shouted out to them. They stared back at me with a mixture of shock and fear. Okay, I was pretty sure they hadn't moved it. They urged me to end the game and go home, not forgetting to tell me to never play this game again. Easy for them to say. They're not the ones being told they will die in 10 days. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. It was awful. I was so stressed out it took me ages to fall asleep. Then when I eventually did, I had an open dream. I dreamt of a spirit girl who was walking to school with me. Then suddenly she pushed me into traffic and a car was coming. I woke up in hot sweats. 3 days later, I sneaked to the house again by myself and asked only one question. "How much longer do I live?" And she answered, 7 D-A-Y-S. So it couldn't be a random answer. The spirit was counting down my remaining days on Earth. 3 days later, I still couldn't stop myself from going there and repeating the same question again, and the answer was 4. I couldn't just wait to die. I had to do something. So I told my parents about it, but they didn't believe me, and even scolded me for playing weird games so late at night. On the day my time was meant to be up, they saw the state I was in. I couldn't stop shaking and refused to get out of bed. There was no way I was going near a road today, so my mom rang the school and said I was sick. Then she stayed home from work and barely left my side. That day went so slowly, but nothing happened. It's a month later now and I'm still alive. I did end up grounded for 3 months for sneaking out at night and terrifying my parents. When my punishment's over, there's no way I'll be taking the Ouija board to any more empty houses. In fact, I've stuck it in the attic and that's where it's staying forever. So that's my story. You can decide for yourself if you're willing to try it or not. But my main advice to you is don't meddle with this stuff, as it's definitely not worth it.
My name's Mary. I'm 20 years old, and I grew up with a very strict and religious mother. Every Sunday during church, I would say the same prayer to God. Please, God, help my mother to change into a different person to make my life easier and more comfortable. I never actually expected God to answer my prayers, but then something completely unexpected happened. Living with my mother wasn't easy for Dad and me. She was very strict and always had her ridiculously high standards. As a result of this, she gave us both a long list of daily house chores, and she could turn from a well-tempered woman into a monster at the slightest thing. Once, when I was dusting, I accidentally smashed one of her beloved cat ornaments, and she locked me in my bedroom for a full day. Another time, Dad forgot to take the trash out, so she emptied it into his briefcase. Mom also liked to have us live by her rules. Dinner was at 7 p.m. prompt. Bedtime was at 9:30 p.m. with no room for adjustment. And under no circumstances was I allowed to ever go out with a boy. I mean, come on, I'm a 20-year-old girl. I started dating this guy called Ben in secret. He's such a kind, caring guy, but I knew Mom wouldn't see it that way. So when I went round to his, I had to pretend to her that I was meeting friends. It was difficult having to lie to Mom, and it sucked that I couldn't stay over at his place. I was a grown woman, but Mom made me feel like I was still a little girl. As much as Dad and I loved Mom, her strict rules and temper were getting to us. One time, I overheard Mom yell at Dad, "You're a useless old fool, and I don't know why I married you." I walked into the kitchen to find Dad sighing deeply while staring blankly into space. Turns out, her outburst was all because he'd made toast with the bread Mom was saving for sandwiches. I felt so bad for him, so the next time I was at church, I said my usual prayer to God. I never expected Mom to actually alter her ways, but then everything changed 180 degrees after the terrible accident. My mom had a serious car crash in which the airbag didn't pop out in time. She bumped her head hard and ended up in a coma. Seeing Mom lying there unconscious and helpless was horrible. I prayed to God for her to wake up, even if it meant putting up with her strict rules. I actually believed that she was in this state because of me and my evil prayers. But then, a miracle happened. After 3 whole agonizing months, my mother woke up. Thank you, God, for answering my prayers again. Only my mother was looking at me like I was a complete stranger. Then she said to me, "Sweetie, do you go to my school? As you look familiar." Huh? What was going on? Then, when she saw her reflection in the mirror, she screamed and said, "How am I so old? This mirror's broken." The doctor ran some tests. Turns out, Mom lost all her memories that happened after she was 18. So, in my mother's mind, she's still an 18-year-old schoolgirl. Having a mother with the mindset of a teenage girl was, well, difficult. We had to decorate the spare room with a load of posters of bands from the 80s I've never heard of before. We had to teach her what a laptop was and show her how to use the cooker. Also, she never cleans anymore, and she even steals my clothes. My dad now works a lot, and I'm stuck playing mom to my mom. I once caught her trying to sneak out in my miniskirt and tie-dye t-shirt, and I folded my arms and scowled at her. "You're not going out dressed like that." She got so mad with me and sulked off to her room. OMG. I just realized I was becoming my mother. But she did look ridiculous. She's a 45-year-old woman, not some teenaged girl. But after the initial shock of my mother acting like a completely different person, I began to warm to her. She was funny, super curious, and most importantly of all, she didn't care about rules. Although one time my cell rang, this startled her so much that she grabbed it and threw it in the sink. Yeah, I wasn't overly impressed, but I guess it was kind of funny. She just didn't understand this world anymore. The one thing I did enjoy was having pamper evenings with her. She put scrunchies in my hair and helped me put my mask on. Then we chatted for hours about school, mean girls, and cute boys. Yeah, so, okay, talking about boys with my mom was weird, but it felt like this wasn't my mom at all, but someone new entirely. Then she asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I nodded without hesitation. Now I can comfortably talk about him without being afraid of her judgment. I told her, Ben is so cute, polite, mature, and very talented, and he's so good with technology. Oh, he sounds swell, she smiled. Could you invite him over to show me how to use that face what's-it thing on the computery thing? I replied, sure, sure, Wendy. This was great. Now, not only could I be open about having a boyfriend, but now instead of feeling afraid of Mom, I was friends with her. Ben came over and helped Mom out with the computer and things. She still seemed completely puzzled by it all, but he seemed so chilled around her, even when she picked up the laptop and began to shake it in an attempt to get it to turn on. Yeah, the on button helps. I left them to it and went to get orange juice, but then I walked back into the room to see her brushing her fingers through his hair. When she saw me, she quickly pulled her hand away, and I was left wondering if I imagined it. But then later on, when we were watching a movie, she made a big deal of sitting next to him. Did my mom have a crush on my boyfriend? No, surely not. But then, after Ben left, Mom said, that Ben is so handsome. Unlike that old man that also lives here, he has terrible dress sense and smells like cod liver oil tablets. This shocked me. Poor Dad. I guess it was a good thing he was working away so much, as I don't think he could have dealt with Mom being like this. Then, a few days later, Mom invited Ben over for dinner to thank him for helping her. At that point, I thought that maybe I was just too skeptical. My mother may be childish and impulsive, but she would never be her daughter's rival, right? While I was cooking in the kitchen, the two of them were laughing non-stop in the living room. They told each other endless stories, and it was annoying that my mother kept praising him and jumping up and down like a kid. I had to put on headphones and try to focus on cooking so I didn't have to hear those ridiculous sounds. But when I finished prepping dinner and took off my headphones, the house was strangely quiet. Where did they go? I walked out into the living room to the most horrifying sight. While Ben was trying to focus on the computer screen, my mother was sitting next to him on the sofa, her hands all over him. What the heck? Her hand was moving downwards and touching his thigh. Stop! I shouted. Startled, Ben stood up. That's when I noticed sweat drenched his shirt. He stuttered out, I didn't do anything. Your mother. And then he ran away. Needless to say, about my mom, she didn't look embarrassed at all. On the contrary, she turned to me and moaned out, "Thanks a lot, Mary. You scared off my date." I went crazy, threw a mirror at her, and told her to have a long, hard look at herself. She screamed back at me that Ben loved her because of her soul, not her age or appearance. And you know what? My mom and Ben are now texting each other. I don't know what's more shocking, that my mom's trying to steal my guy, or that she actually figured out how to text. Ben showed me some of the messages, and they're so bad, I actually thought I was going to vomit. One message said, "Please, Ben, I want to meet up in secret and kiss you and things. Mary never needs to know." Ben explained to me that he didn't know what to do. He says he loves me and never wants to risk losing me, but he didn't want to be rude to my mom as he knew she wasn't herself. Poor Ben having to deal with all this. From now on, I'm keeping Ben and my mom apart. So I've gone from having a secret boyfriend to having a mom who wants to kiss my boyfriend. My life is crazy. Please, God, I don't recognize my disciplined, strict mother anymore. And as challenging as it was to be around her, I miss her, and I just want her back. Hi, my name's Kat, which is short for Catherine, but only my mom calls me that. My dad's Indian, and my mom's American. They met back when he was working over here. Then they fell in love, got married, and had me. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and they split up before I was born. In India, when you marry, it's meant to be for life. But still, my parents got divorced, so the reason for that must have been really serious. So serious that till this day, I still don't know. Every time I asked about it, my parents would just ignore me and change the subject. Anyway, I've always lived with my mom, but my dad lives close by. Most kids from broken homes hate not having both parents around all the time, but this never bothered me. Don't get me wrong, I love my dad and all, but I guess I couldn't miss what I didn't know. Besides, I had far bigger problems to deal with. Okay, so don't laugh, hear me out. I'm a tomboy, a fact which my mom hates. Yep, I detest wearing skirts and dresses. or anything girly and sparkly. Yuck! Give me basketball shorts and a baggy t-shirt any day. Also, I don't understand why some girls spend ages doing their makeup. Why would I want to make myself look like some living doll just to impress people? Please. I didn't get on that well with other girls. I guess I just had nothing in common with them. I didn't care about shopping and watching rom-coms. Nope. I'd much rather be kicking a ball around or playing video games. My best friend's a boy called Harry, and I've known him for forever. He's the one who taught me how to ride a skateboard. Talk about an adrenaline buzz. Now I pretty much go everywhere on one. I'm like a real-life Bart Simpson. For my whole life, my mom's given me disapproving looks. From the time when I only invited boys to my 6th birthday party, tore the arms off the dolls she gave me, and point-blank refused to move when she booked me in for ballet classes. I just wasn't a tea time with dolls and teddy bears kind of girl, and I didn't understand why she couldn't just buy me trucks and action figures instead. Then on top of that, Mom only dressed me up in skirts and dresses. I had no option but to wear them and endure school feeling so uncomfortable. I mean, have you tried playing soccer in a frilly dress? Talk about ridiculous. The other boys always had to wait for me to straighten out my skirt or try and find the hairpins that kept tumbling out of my hair. I mean, seriously, those things were so lame. By the time I reached 12, I was done wearing girly clothes just to please my mom, so I wore comfy, passed-down clothes that I got from my cousins beneath the hideous dresses and took them off en route to school. I was also so sick of my long, boring hair, so one day I snuck into the barber's after school and got an undercut. Then one evening, I was chilling on the couch when Mom pointed at my hair and in a horrified voice said, "Catherine, what have you done to yourself?" I hadn't realized the way I was lying meant some of my undercut was on show. I just shrugged and replied, "It's my hair, so I can do what I want with it." "Why would you want to make yourself look ugly?" she shouted. "It's not ugly. It's cool." My mom looked so shocked. She grounded me for a month, and during that time, she barely spoke to me. The quarreling didn't end there. Over the next few years, it seemed like every little thing I did annoyed her. From chewing on gum to refusing to wear a dress to my cousin's wedding, you name it, it made her mad. On loads of occasions, she shouted at me that she wished I was normal. I didn't get it. My friends and teachers didn't treat me like I was an alien. So why did my mom? One time, when I was about to leave and go and skateboard with Harry, she actually accused me of being a lesbian. I just rolled my eyes at this. For the record, I'm not. I've had crushes on boys before. Anyway, my dad was a lot more chilled than Mom. He's totally okay with me being a tomboy. One time, he even sent me a gift box with this really cool sports jersey and shorts in it. I stuck it in my wardrobe to hide it from Mom, but she still managed to find it and threw it all in the trash. As I questioned her why she did that, she replied, "If you want to live like a boy that much, you should move in with your dad." This made me so mad. So I packed a bag and went to Dad's place. He was bugged out by what my mom had done, but still, he told me I should forgive her and that I couldn't live here for good with him, as he couldn't be home all the time and take care of me like Mom did. Yeah, right. More like he knew Mom would never let this happen. It's like she hated me, but she still wanted me around so she had someone to moan at. I stayed with Dad for a few days until he had to go on a business trip. Then I had to reluctantly go home, though I was still kind of sulky at my mom. Then came the bombshell as I just arrived home. Mom sat me down and told me that she was dating some new guy called Max. Wow. I knew Mom and I weren't close, but I had no idea she'd been dating some new dude. "We're planning the wedding, and of course I want you to be my bridesmaid, but you'll have to wear a dress." What? She'd known the guy for 5 minutes, and now she was marrying him? Yeah. "Whatever," I replied. My mom looked surprised. "That's all? You seriously have no problem with this?" I got up and walked upstairs to my room while saying, "Yeah, Mom, I'm okay with it. I support you doing what you like, not like you who always scolds me for my preferences." I could sense my mom being flustered without looking back. Ha! I'd won this round. "So, Max moved in with his teenage daughter, Taylor, who's a year younger than me and goes to the same school. Talk about a Barbie. All she seems to be is a mass of shiny blonde hair and pink everything. Like, seriously, her rucksack, bed covers, curtains, even her phone's pink. But it's fine. Everyone has their own taste, so, whatever. Actually, it turns out that this new addition to the family wasn't as bad as I thought. Max is an okay guy who never looks down on me or comments on my tomboy ways. And about my mom, her focus towards me decreased. I was basically invisible to her, now she had Taylor around. You think I'd be mad jealous, huh? Actually, no. Not at all. I was glad of the peace. But then Mom started comparing me to that brat, saying how I should be more like her as we were both girls, but I acted like a little demon. What? Taylor was so pathetic. She screamed when she saw a roach in the kitchen and refused to get down from the worktop until it had been removed. Don't even get me started on how she acted like she couldn't reach the top shelves in the school's library, so other boys had to help her. Ugh, sickening. Then things got heated when Taylor stormed into my room and asked me to come down for dinner. Well, I probably was playing my music too loudly to hear her knocking on my door, but still, she wasn't welcome here. Then she took a quick look around my room. Okay, I'm not exactly the most organized person, but I know exactly where things are. I asked her, "What are you gawping at?" "Nothing," she bluffed. "Hey, why don't we go to the mall tomorrow? Let's go buy something cute. I need new clothes, and looks like you could use some help too." "I'm good, thanks. Crop tops aren't really my style. I'm not that much of a tryhard." I smirked at her. "Oh, please. You wish you were like me. Look at yourself. You have the sense of fashion of a 5-year-old boy. That's so childish. Who wears cargo pants anymore? Beats being a flamboyant ugly duckling who hides behind a zillion layers of pink glitter and foundation. Well, at least this ugly duckling will soon become a swan. But you're stuck being a nobody forever. No wonder Mom hates you." I stared at her with hatred. Who was she to judge me in my own house? I needed to teach this brat a lesson. I charged towards her and yanked back her hair. She yelled at me to stop. Then at that moment, my mother appeared and shouted at me, "Catherine, stop this at once! You need to grow up." "Me?" I shouted back. "She just told me you don't love me." "Well, she has a point. No one could love someone who acts like this. Look in the mirror. Taylor only said what we're all thinking. You're 17 already, for God's sakes. Grow up a little and give me a break." What was Mom saying? She was taking the side of some random girl that only just moved in over her actual daughter? Great. There's zero use fighting with these close-minded morons. I let go of Taylor and pushed her and my mom out of my room, screaming at them, "Fine! You two go and live happily ever after in your pink, fake, girly world." Then I slammed the door in their dumb faces. I was so done with them. I was so done with everything. Hey, it's me, Kat. I'm back to fill you in on the next part of my drama-filled life. So, me and my mom have never got on that well. She hates my tomboy ways and wishes I was a girl. So when her new fiancé Max moved in with his Barbie doll daughter Taylor, well, my mom instantly loved her more than me. During an argument, she even told me that she couldn't love someone like me and that I should grow up. How could my mom say that to my face? And especially in front of that little brat Taylor. I was so angry that I shut myself in my room that night and skipped dinner. But then, around 3 a.m., my stomach wouldn't quit growling, so I snuck down to the kitchen, and surprise, surprise, there was no leftover food for me at all. Great. Clearly, they didn't view me as a part of this family anymore, and wanted me to starve to death. I couldn't fall back asleep after that. So as soon as the sun came up, I called my best friend Harry up early. He answered the phone half asleep. "What?" I told him to rise and shine, as I needed saving from my nightmare of a home life. Oh, and I also told him to bring food. He muttered out "Yeah, fine." At least leaving early meant I wouldn't have to face Mom and Taylor. As soon as I got into Harry's car, he threw me a sandwich and asked what was wrong. And I told him how Taylor's basically Nightmare Barbie. He grinned at me. Yeah? What'd she do? Steal all your food? Trust him to make a joke out of my distress. Anyways, I told him everything that had happened while munching on the sandwich. He replied, Come on, Kat. Like you're gonna let some 16-year-old get the better of you? How about I come over after school and suss out the situation? I'll fight off this kid for you. I jokingly replied, Okay, I guess that might help keep the peace, as for some reason my mom seems to like you. So Harry came around, and naturally, my mom was all over him, telling him how handsome he is and demanding he stay for dinner. Talk about cringe! Then I had to listen to Mom telling him how she didn't understand me, and how he should talk some sense into me. Hello? I was still in the room. Then Taylor arrived home all shiny-haired and girly. I swear my mom's face lit up just by seeing her, and worse still, so did Harry's. Ugh! Oh, Harry, have you met Taylor? Kat's sister. She goes to the same school as you guys. Hi, Taylor. I've definitely seen you around, but I didn't know you were Kat's sister. She wouldn't tell me. He elbowed me while being all smiley to her. In that whiny voice of hers, Taylor replied, Nice to meet you, Harry. Are you Kat's boyfriend? We all burst out laughing. Then my mom chimed in, Honey, I wish, but no. Your sister seems to be allergic to love. But you two would make a lovely couple. What on earth? They both laughed, and Harry replied, I'd love to, but such a pretty girl like Taylor wouldn't lay an eye on me. Great. Thanks, Harry. As if Taylor isn't big-headed enough. I slyly kicked Harry's leg and gave him a dirty look. After dinner, me and Harry went to play video games in my room. As soon as I closed the door, he told me that Taylor seemed all right. Was he blinded by her Barbie looks or something? I was so mad that I slammed down my game's controller and told him he sucked. Ugh! Why did everyone treat me like such a joke? So, what if I didn't dress up girly? I still had feelings. They knew nothing about me. I actually had a huge crush on this boy at school called Garrett. He was on the boys' soccer team, and he was so talented. I totally swooned out loud when he scored 3 goals in a row. I usually didn't like jocks. As a member of the girls' soccer team, our teams often trained together, and I had to put up with them showing off to impress girls, while in reality, they couldn't actually play, and they skipped practice all the time to go partying. Garrett was different. He totally shined amongst those useless guys. I took the initiative to talk to him. Turns out, Garrett and I had loads in common. We instantly clicked and talked non-stop about soccer, skateboarding, and other stuff. Okay, so there was one problem. He seemed to be interested in the cheerleader type of girl. Once he even admitted his celebrity crush was Selena Gomez. Yeah, I know. She's as girly as you can get. That got me thinking a lot. I definitely wouldn't change who I was, but maybe a little makeover wouldn't hurt, right? I told Harry about it, and he just told me it was stupid, and he wasn't really supportive, which was strange for him, but whatever. So Harry worked evenings and weekends at the burger joint in the mall. I knew it was just so he could check out the girls going into the clothes shop opposite. I knew if I was going to win Garrett's heart, then I'd need to change my style, so I started visiting Harry more often at work. I'd sit there munching on free fries while watching the girly girls shop, so I could get the gist of the in trends and stuff. Then I stole my mom's lip gloss and some glittery eyeshadow and put it on for school. I even started wearing this plaid purple skirt Mom bought for me. I mean, at least it was sort of edgy, right? Though I had nothing other than my collection of oversized tees to go with it, but whatever. It was girly enough. OMG. Wearing a skirt is hard work. I couldn't run as fast or jump up to grab something off the top shelf. I also kept on forgetting I was wearing a skirt and sitting with my legs apart. Oops. My plan was working, though, as Garrett started sitting with me and Harry at lunch. Oh, and one time when I was struggling to run in a skirt, he passed me his jacket to tie around my waist. It gets even better. He invited me to his soccer team party. OMG! Talk about hitting the jackpot. This meant he liked me, right? That was it. I decided that the party will be my grand finale. I'd get a total makeover and confess my feelings to him while there. Finally, the day of the party arrived, so I put my awesome plan into action. Okay, so Mom's lousy makeup just wasn't cutting it, so I went into the drugstore and used up the testers. I even packed a pair of Mom's high heels with me. Now all I needed was a dress. Obviously, I wasn't going to buy one for keeps. No, I'd wear them for the party and return it the next day. All of my spying taught me one thing. Floral print was the in thing right now. So I bought this flowy floral dress in my size and went to the mall restrooms to try it on, so I had more privacy. I put the high heels on and zipped up the dress, but it seemed a little tight. Jeez, talk about tiring. I could barely reach the zipper on my back. After, 5 minutes of struggling, I was impatient and used up all of my force to pull it up. Done. Finally! But, my hair was stuck in between the zipper! Ugh, stupid long hair. I began to panic. I was completely stuck. Harry was on shift in the burger joint, so I sent him an emergency message. He sent me 5 crying with laughter emojis back, but he also said he'd be straight over. I couldn't expect him to come into the girls' restrooms, so I had to try and walk out into the mall foyer. My hair was stuck, so I had my face up to the sky, and every step was shaky due to the high heels. My 2 arms went straight out to navigate since I couldn't properly see the way. I must have looked like a zombie. People were whispering and laughing. It flustered me, and I tripped. The laughters were even louder now, and I couldn't even get up. I laid there in a weird position, feeling so helpless as anger and embarrassment filled me up. Thank God I heard a familiar voice. "Kat, are you okay?" Harry to the rescue. Finally! He shooed everyone away, took the heels off my feet, and helped me get up. Then he said, "Oh my God, Kat, what have you done? Seriously, why are you making a fool of yourself just because of some jock? You've lost yourself, Kat." He kept on grumbling as he tried to fix the zipper. Great, as if I wasn't already miserable enough. He was treating me just like my mom did. I was so angry, I pushed him out of my way as soon as he was done with the zipper, then stomped off. I was so mad. I washed all of the makeup off my face, changed back to my normal clothes, and went home. No more party or whatever. I was done. As soon as I reached home, I ran straight to my room and saw a brand new dress on my bed. What? I never wanted to see one of those evil things again. I grabbed the dress and stormed downstairs and started screaming at Mom. "I won't wear this. I hate it. I will never be like Little Miss Perfect Taylor, so please stop." I expected Mom to yell back, but to my surprise, she didn't. She told me that Harry had messaged her telling her what had happened. Oh my God, Harry, you snitch! I pulled out my phone and was about to dial the number to yell at him. Mom stopped me and continued. "He's worried about you, honey, so he asked me to help you out. I saw this dress in a shop the other day and bought it for you to wear to my wedding, but I think today is a special occasion too. Put it on, and go tell that boy you like him." Mom hugged me. Wow, talk about an emotional roller coaster. I was so touched and embarrassed about my thoughts and actions, so I agreed to let Mom help me curl my hair and apply my makeup, and I wore the dress she bought. I actually looked pretty cute, not gonna lie. She looked so happy and wished me good luck as I walked out of the house in ballet pumps, not high heels. Those things are evil. The party wasn't till later, so I texted Garrett and told him to meet me at the coffee shop around the corner. Everything was set. There's only one last step left. Hey, Kat here again. Are you ready for the next part of my story? If you haven't seen the first 2 parts, then what are you doing? Go and watch them right now. But if you have seen them, do you remember what happened to me? I'm a tomboy, a fact which my mom hates. Then her fiancé Max moved in with his girly daughter Taylor, and Mom clearly favored her over me. If this wasn't enough to deal with, I was then in an embarrassing situation at the mall while trying to be girly to impress this cute guy called Garrett who's into girly girls. So, after the rescue of my best friend Harry and some help getting ready from my mom, I arranged to meet Garrett at the coffee shop so I could tell him exactly how I felt about him before his soccer team party. As I walked up the street to meet Garrett, I felt so happy. I'm sure it would be a surprise for him to see me dressed all girly, and he'd be into it. Then we'd kiss. Wow, that sounds great. I was the first one there, so I grabbed a hot chocolate and waited. Geez, that 5-minute wait felt like 5 years. Then he strolled through the door looking so casual but cute. He looked me up and down and then said, Kat, you do know the party later is just a casual hangout? I kept my cool as I replied, oh, this old dress? It's just something I threw on in a hurry. He ordered a drink and we talked for a bit. I knew it was the only chance, either now or never, so I just came out with it. Look, Garrett, I think you're cool. Really cool, in fact. I have a crush on you. No, I think I like you a lot. He looked a little flustered, but surely this was totally normal, as he was just digesting my words, right? After a few minutes of silence, he gave me an awkward look as he said, Kat, I think you're great, but you're not my type. I just see you as one of the boys. I'm not his type? And he just sees me as a boy? I sat there completely heartbroken. Each word he said felt like a sharp knife stabbing into my little heart. I immediately stood up and asked him, What, you don't think I'm a girl? I'm in a dress, for goodness sake. If I'm not girly enough for you, then who is? He seemed a bit confused by my question, then reluctantly replied, I'm into gentle girls who need me to protect. Like Taylor, for example. She's your sister, right? Could you help me and Taylor become a couple? What? Not only did he have the cheek to publicly reject me, but now he was admitting to me that he liked that Barbie doll? I yelled at him. You have to be kidding me. Out of all the girls in the world, you like Taylor? Then I stormed out of there, relieved that I'd worn ballet pumps over evil high heels. I arrived home to the smell of freshly baked scones. Then I saw my mom and Taylor baking together in the kitchen. I wasn't in the mood for cooking with Barbie hour, so I slammed the door shut and stomped up to my room. My mom appeared and shouted up the stairs to me, Hey, honey, how was your date? Why are you back so early? Seriously, it was pretty clear from my door slamming that it hadn't gone well. Why did she feel the need to humiliate me in front of Taylor, of all people? Get real, Mom. I'm clearly upset. But then, what do you know? You only care about your shiny new daughter, Taylor. I ran into my room to change out of that damn dress I was wearing. Then I threw it down the stairs at her and yelled out, It's your dress, so take it back, and play dress-ups with her instead. My mom looked hurt, and at first, I felt a little bad. But then she shouted back, Why can't you just act like a normal girl and grow up? If you stopped being so selfish and made an effort with your appearance, your date might have gone better. Then Taylor continued, Don't be too much for Mom. She means well. If that boy doesn't like you, then that's your issue, not hers. What the hell? How dare this nobody blame me? And why was she calling my mom Mom? I didn't call Max Dad. Ugh, she was the worst person in the world. I hated her. I wanted her to go back to Barbie Land and never come back. I stormed out of the house and took the bus to my dad's house. I tried to hold back my emotions so that I wouldn't burst into tears, but honestly, I had nothing. Garrett had brutally rejected me in favor of Taylor. I was still in a mood with Harry, and Mom had made it clear I was an embarrassment to her. The worst part was Harry had been right. I had lost myself. I was not myself anymore. I showed up at Dad's, and as soon as he opened the door, I burst into tears and hugged him. I told him everything and begged him to let me live with him. Dad tried to analyze everything for me. After a while, I calmed down and realized that, okay, maybe I was a bit sassy with Mom. Then Dad said, Actually, Kat, there's something I wanted to tell you. I really still love your mom and want you to help me get back with her. Whoa! I wasn't expecting that, but I was totally down for helping him. Goodbye to Barbie Taylor and hello to a proper family. Dad allowed me to stay for the night to let the tension between Mom and me calm down. His apartment was on the small side, so I had to sleep on the couch. But I didn't mind, as it meant I could stay up watching movies all night without Mom moaning at me that I needed my beauty sleep. I arrived home the next day to Mom and Max cleaning the house together. They were laughing and joking around and, yeah, okay, they looked really happy together. But Dad deserved this happiness more, right? I greeted both of them, but only Max replied. My mother ignored me like I was invisible. She must have still been mad at me. So all this tension wasn't a part of my get Dad back with Mom plan. So before I left for school, I walked up to Mom, said sorry, then kissed her on the cheek. Cheesy, but worth it. Then, as I was rummaging through my locker at school, I felt someone pat me on the shoulder. I turned around to see that it was Harry. Kat, I'm sorry, he said. I turned around and continued to look through my locker. I'd forgiven him already, but I wanted to make him sweat a bit first. Come on, Kat. I won't be able to study if I know you're mad at me, and my grades will suffer. I laughed and said, take me out for ice cream after school, and I may consider forgiving you. I think I can manage that. He smiled at me. After school, we went to the ice cream shop nearby. My mood was so good, and I told Harry all about my plan to get Dad back with Mom. He wasn't so sure about it, but regardless of this, he promised to have my back. So, I had an ally, and the plan to heal my parents' feelings officially began. First, I invited Dad over for dinner. Mom wasn't overly impressed, but she couldn't say no. After all, he was my dad. During the meal, I went on about past stories, such as the time we all went on vacation together for my 7th birthday, and Dad lost his swimming trunks in the sea. My parents and Max just laughed, but I could make out the annoyed look on Taylor's face. After the meal, we watched TV together, and Taylor volunteered to make drinks for everyone. Then she brought out 5 glasses of orange juice. Dad took a large sip of his, then immediately spit it out all over his clothes and rushed to the toilet. Turns out she'd put mustard in my dad's glass, but neither Max nor Mom said anything about it. Damn little Taylor. Then one night, when I knew that Mom and Max were going on a private date, I deliberately hid Max's key. By the time they found them in the plant pot 2 hours later, they'd missed their time slot. Talk about success. Another day, my mom suggested going on a picnic, so I immediately called Harry and my dad and invited them to join. Then, while we were in the park waiting for Harry to show up, I saw Garrett walking over, hand in hand, with Taylor. Talk about awkward. Garrett couldn't even meet my eye, and I just wanted the ground to swallow me up. Mom asked them how long they'd been together. She said 2 weeks, so I did the math. OMG. That meant they got together on the day I confessed my feelings towards him. Whatever. I was so over Garrett. Although I have to admit, I was relieved when I saw Harry walking over with a basket full of my favorite foods. Taylor kept asking Garrett to feed her. Ew. It was so awkward. When Harry saw me staring at the couple with bullet-like eyes, he so quickly passed me a slice of chocolate cake. A while later, I asked Harry to help me take some photos. Then I quickly dragged Dad and Mom to take family pictures. I could see Dad was enjoying standing next to her, and I heard him tell her that she looked beautiful. Good one, Dad. Only Taylor wasn't having any of it. She immediately led Max over and pushed me out of the way so he could stand next to Mom. I stood next to Taylor, and before Harry counted to 3, I flipped Taylor's hair and deliberately stood over her. She glared at me. But I'm on top of the world, sucker! Anyway, I felt so good after that picnic, and I even thought that the day when Dad returned home would be soon. But a few days later during dinner, Mom and Max went on about what starters they wanted at their wedding. What? She still wanted to marry Max? So what about my dad? I immediately showed my annoyance, skipped my half-eaten meal, and stormed up to my room. I sat in my room, looked back at the picnic photos, and thought about my next plan. Then I heard a knock on the door. It was Max. Kat, I have something important to tell you, he said with a sad voice. Uh-oh, this couldn't be good, could it? Hey, Cat here. Again. I hope you're not bored of me yet. As if. Anyway, here's a recap of the last part of my story so far. In the last episode, I confessed my feelings to my crush, Garrett, but he rejected me because I was not girly enough for him. To make it even worse, he said he liked Taylor and wanted me to help them become a couple. I couldn't believe it. I was so furious that I argued with my mom. Then I came to my dad's house, and that's when my dad asked me to help him get back with mom. Apparently, I jumped at the chance and immediately put my healing family relationships plan into action. But suddenly, Max said that he wanted to tell me something important. So, okay, he led me out to the garden. I followed him and kept wondering what he wanted to talk to me about. Did he know I wanted to split him and my mom up, and he was going to scold me for it? No way! As soon as we sat down, I asked him immediately, "What's the matter?" He just smiled. "I wanted to chat with you, so that we could understand each other better." I gave him a doubtful look. Why did he suddenly care about me? Jeez, this was so awkward. Then Max said, "Kat, I know that you want your parents to get back together." He hesitated a bit, then continued, "I don't dare to say that I'm better than your dad, but, we are all from broken families, and I just want to give you, your mom, and Taylor a happy home life. So, I hope that you'll accept me and give me a chance." I didn't know how to reply to him. Okay, so I knew that Max truly loved my mom, as he always looked at her affectionately. But what about my dad? He was miserable without mom, and if given the chance, he would definitely make us happy. As for Max, I was sure he'd have no trouble finding someone else. Okay, so I might have said Max was kind, but the reality was he wasn't right for mom, but my dad was. I mean, they had history, and they had me. The wedding day loomed closer, and Mom and Max grew even soppier together. I wanted to cancel the wedding, but it seemed impossible. But then I realized something. Maybe I could somehow delay it? I had thought seriously for a few days. Then I came up with an idea. I would pretend to break my leg. If I couldn't come to the wedding, my mom had to postpone it, right? OMG! I was absolutely a genius. I immediately messaged Harry and told him about my bright idea for my Get Dad Back with Mom plan. Naturally, he replied I was bonkers, but he agreed to help me. He even told me how that could work, as his cousin was a doctor and he would definitely help us. Awesome! However, to make this plan work, first of all, I had to appear helpful so Mom wouldn't suss me out. So I kept asking her about the wedding preparations and said that she could tell me if she needed help. At first, she was quite surprised, but then she looked so happy and satisfied. Maybe Mom thought that her beloved daughter had finally grown up. That day, after school, I put the plan into action. Of course, with the help of Harry's doctor cousin. His cousin was really helpful. After bandaging my leg, he even gave me advice on how to walk, like I had really broken it. Then Harry took me home. When seeing me, my mom was totally terrified. She kept asking us what had happened. Harry lied that during a game of soccer, I'd tried to steal the ball and fallen awkwardly on my leg. I hadn't wanted to worry them, so he'd taken me to his cousin's clinic. I'd fractured it, and it would take me about 4 weeks to recover. His story was so real that I almost believed it myself. He was absolutely the best comrade in my life. After that, Mom spent more time taking care of me and wasn't as strict as before. Honestly, it was great. However, I really missed practice, and lying on my bed all day wasn't as fun as it sounded. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, so my mom always brought me food so that I didn't need to go downstairs. One day, after lunch, I was so bored that I decided to go over to my desk to pick up my laptop and play some music. While I was standing and swinging to the rhythm, my mom came in with a plate of fruit in her hand. I was so surprised, but I immediately leaned on the desk and said, She rushed to help me and asked what I was doing. In my most pitiful voice, I said, "Mom, I wanted to practice walking for your big day, but my leg just hurts so much, and I'm not sure I'll be able to cope with the wedding. She stroked my hair and said, "It's okay, honey. Harry will come with you to the wedding and help you out." I leaned on her and sobbed. I can't do it. You see, Taylor will look like a princess and I'll look like an Egyptian mummy. I wish there was some way the wedding could be delayed for a bit. My voice was smaller, and my eyes filled with false tears. Oh my God, forget soccer. I needed to join the drama club. The next day, she came into my room with Max, and she told me that they had some big news. "We can't contemplate getting married without you there, so we've decided to postpone the wedding until your leg is better." OMG. I'm a genius! But I tried not to look too excited. As soon as they left my room, I messaged Dad and told him the amazing news. Then I told him that I'd given him more time, but he needed to up his game. After that, Dad dropped in all the time, with the excuse that he wanted to check on me. But the problem was that Max was always around, so Dad couldn't have any private time with Mom. Cue the next step of my plan. I told my mom that I wanted to move down to Taylor's bedroom as her room was on the first floor, so I could walk around the house and get some fresh air. She agreed Taylor and I could switch rooms. But I begged again. No way! Taylor stole my crush, and now she's gonna live in my room? It's too much to even think about. Why don't you tell Max and Taylor to move out for a while? At least until my leg's better. Whenever I see Taylor running and dancing around, it bugs me out. She's so insensitive. Mom looked flustered, but she tried to keep calm and persuaded me to exchange the room with Taylor, just until my leg was better. At that point, Max came in. Turns out, he'd overheard our conversation. He turned to her and said, "Mary, I think Taylor and I should go and stay with my parents for a while. Then, when Kat's all healed up, we can come back." Mom's eyes filled up with tears, and I did feel a little bad, but when I saw him kiss her on the top of the head, I just felt annoyed. Mom belonged with Dad, not him. That night, while I was lying on the bed and texting Harry, Taylor stormed in looking furious. I took my eyes off the phone, smirked, and said, "Oh, it's nice of you to take time out of packing to visit me." She yelled at me, "Stop being so selfish and stop this! Because of you, the wedding has been delayed, and now you're kicking us out? Newsflash, this is my home too, Kat. The world doesn't just revolve around you." I stared at her. OMG. Why couldn't she just shut up and leave already? I told her, "You can stay here, but first, you need to break up with Garrett." She was furious and ran out without saying anything. Finally, Max and Taylor moved out. Plus, Harry told me that Taylor had broken up with Garrett. Oh my God, that feeble girl was so docile. Life was pretty awesome, but I couldn't wait to lose that itchy bandage. Dad popped by loads to take care of me. He even brought some cherry cakes and tulips, my mom's favorites for her. I felt like after all these storms, my family were finally reunited. Then, after a whole agonizing month, it was time for the bandage to go. Of course, I couldn't go to the clinic with my mom, so I came up with some excuse that I wanted to eat her clam soup when I got back. It worked, as she called Harry to go with me. When the bandage was removed, I cheered, and Harry laughed at me. "I hope it was worth it, Kat," he said. It totally was. I winked at him. I arrived home expecting Mom to greet me excitedly, but she wasn't in the kitchen. I heard voices coming from upstairs, so I stealthily put my ear against the door and heard Mom's voice. "We're over, Satya! How can you beg for me back after what you did?" Then I heard Dad reply, "I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. I should never have forced you to have an abortion just because the baby was a girl. But you know the pressures of having a son in India. Moreover, then there were your complications. You had one chance at having a baby. That's why I thought holding out for a son would be better. But that was the past. I've changed now. I love you and our daughter, and I just want to take care of you both. Oh, please. You only support Kat dressing like a boy because you want her to be a boy. Please, stop bothering us and leave us alone. What? Turns out, Dad had never truly supported me. He just wanted to have a son? He was the one who didn't want me to exist in the world. All along, he was the villain, not Mom. I felt disgusted. I slumped in front of the door and couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like my whole life had been one big stinking lie. Hey, Kat here. I don't want to alarm you or anything, but this is the final part of my story. I hope you'll enjoy it. And here's a reminder of what's happened in the last part. You remember, my dad told me surprising news that he wanted to get back with Mom, and he needed my help, don't you? Of course, I jumped at the chance and immediately put my healing family relationships plan into action. I knew I had to somehow delay Mom's wedding to Max, so I pretended to break my leg. My plan was totally working, as not only did they postpone the wedding, but Max and Taylor moved out to give me time to heal. I was very satisfied because everything was going as I planned, when suddenly, right on the day I had the bandage removed, I arrived home to hear the awful truth that shocked me to my core. My dad didn't want me to exist in the world because I was a girl. As soul-destroying as it was, I continued to listen to Mom and Dad's conversation. I heard Mom say, "I will never forgive you and never forget the moment you wanted me to get an abortion. Never! So don't think I will ever let you come back to this family." Dad replied, "Mary, please, I beg you." I'd heard enough, so I ran into my room. It all made sense now. No wonder Dad supported my tomboy style, because he desperately wanted a boy. As for my mom, she tried to make me dress up like a girl to get revenge on him. Feeling unwanted and unloved, I packed some clothes and quietly left the house. Normally, when I was upset, I would run to my dad's, but that option was out, obviously, so where could I go? Then I thought about Harry, so I called him to pick me up, and I just told him that I felt really bad right now and wanted to run away from home. Without knowing what the exact problem was, he showed up and drove us to the beach. He bought us loads of snacks, and we sat there in silence and watched the sun go down. Then Harry turned to me and said, "Are you ready to talk about it now?" I sighed, ate a handful of Cheetos, then told him everything. I still can't believe it. My dad, the person I love the most, didn't want me at all. Then my mom just used me to make him suffer. Talk about exhausting. It's best if I disappear from their lives. It's not like I'm wanted here anyway. Harry listened. He looked shocked, but he didn't interrupt me. Then he patted me on the back and pulled me in for a big hug. It was weird because we never usually showed each other that kind of affection, but it didn't feel strange at all. Instead, I felt safe next to him. At this vulnerable moment, he's the only person I still trusted. After a long silence, Harry turned to me and said, Who said you aren't wanted? I'm happy that you were born. I mean, meeting you is the best thing that ever happened to me. I've never met someone like you before. Kat, you're a brave and an amazing girl." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt my face turn bright red. I never knew that Harry thought of me like that. Then he touched my hand and said, "And there's something you should know. I really..." Oh my god. I didn't know why my heart was beating so fast. What's he gonna say? But then, his phone rang. It was my mum. She'd been looking for me for hours and was worried sick. When Harry told her I was with him, and I was fine, she sounded so relieved. I'm not a blubber. I cried and couldn't stop. I let Harry tell her where we were. When Mum arrived, she rushed over and hugged me. "Why didn't you tell me you were at the beach? I was so worried. Honey, don't you ever do that to me again." I hugged her and cried so loud, I didn't really know why I cried. Maybe because it was the first time we've ever properly hugged, and I could feel her love towards me. After we finally stopped crying, and trust me, it took a while, I told her that I knew the reason why she'd divorced Dad. She wiped off tears on my face and said, "Oh, sweetie, I kind of guessed you must have heard us fighting earlier. I'm so sorry about that. And now you know the reason why I was always so strict on you and wanted you to dress like a girl, to show your dad how amazing it is to have a daughter. But instead, you dress and behave like a boy, just like your father wanted. But Mom, you have to understand that I dress and behave like this because it's who I am. It's not because of Dad, not because of Harry, not because of anyone. If I change, it would mean that I don't live as my true self anymore. So, can you please let me be me, Mom?" My mom smiled at me and replied, "Oh, of course, sweetie. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. It was so selfish of me. I was so focused on going against your father that I forgot about your feelings. Can you ever forgive me?" "Of course, Mom." And then we cried again. Since then, things with my mom have improved a lot, but there was still some unfinished business I had to handle. Firstly, I had to swallow my pride and apologize to Max and Taylor. Harry came with me for moral support. We all sat down, and I apologized for being a childish brat. "You're a good man, Max, and my mom truly loves you. I would be grateful if you and Taylor would be a part of this family. Can you two please come back?" I said. He looked shocked for a moment, but then he smiled at me and said, "With pleasure. I miss your mom so much, it's driving me crazy." "Yep, he's been so miserable without her," Taylor added. "I'm sorry to you too, Taylor. Do you need some help with packing?" I asked her. Taylor smiled at me and replied, "Sure, that'd be great." So, Mom and Max had a small ceremony in the end, although I still ended up wearing a dress, but hey, it was an exception for Mom's special day. It was a beautiful ceremony, and Mom looked amazing. Next, I had to make Taylor and Garrett get back together. I went to see Garrett at school and told him that it was all my fault Taylor broke up with him. He looked quite shocked, but at the same time, he was also happy to hear me say that. Well, that was such a relief. I felt much better now, knowing that I cleared up all misunderstandings between them. Then, when I was having lunch with Taylor in the cafeteria, he walked over with this enormous bouquet of roses, passed them to her, and asked her to be his girlfriend again. Taylor looked so surprised, but then she gave me a worried look. I smiled and said, "It's okay. You two are meant for each other." She was so happy she hugged me. I guess it was good to see her happy. And last but not least, I had to finish off the beach conversation with Harry. Obviously, I couldn't let that slide that easily. I've been thinking about it a lot, wondering what could it possibly be. Geez, why does it feel like my whole body is heating up every time I think back to that moment? I asked him to come to the beach, where I prepared a blanket on the sand with 2 cans of Coke and a huge pizza. His face lit up when he saw the setup. We had an awesome time and didn't stop laughing, even when Harry teased me by reminding me how I'd worn a dress to impress Garrett. I looked Harry in the eyes and said, "Thanks. Thanks for always having my back when I needed. And, meeting you is also the greatest thing that ever happened to me. You're the only one who accepts me for who I am." He touched my hand and said, "Kat, last time, I wanted to tell you something. I really like you, and I want us to be more than friends. Will you be my girlfriend?" Oh my God, this was crazy. Suddenly, I felt so shy, so I gently punched his arm and turned away, looking elsewhere so he couldn't see I was blushing like a tomato. Then I said, "Okay, fine, but it's just because I pity you." He laughed and hugged me. It felt so good being in his arms. Life was pretty great. Finally, but there was just one last issue to resolve. My dad. I went round to his place and we had a super long talk. He admitted he messed up and apologized for what he'd done in the past and for trying to get me to split Mom and Max up. He told me that it didn't matter if I was a boy or not. He will always love me and is very proud of me. So, As you can see, it's been a whirlwind, but it all worked out in the end. I have the best boyfriend ever and an amazing family. I've been through a lot, but all I'm gonna say is never change who you are just to fit into the norm or to please anyone. Be yourself, and the right people will love the real you. If they can't accept you for who you are, then they're just not worth it.
Hi, I'm Diane, and I'm 20 years old. I fell in love on the first day of college. I'm not even joking. I'd promised my mom I'd focus on my studies and wouldn't fall for any boys. But one look at Brett, and I broke that promise immediately. We had an instant connection, and pretty soon we were spending every waking moment together. I can't help but think that if I hadn't met him, maybe I'd never have found out the dark secret my mom and aunt had been hiding from me my whole life. You see, my mom raised me alone, and I had no idea who my dad was. Let's just say it seemed like my mom got around, so she really didn't want me to get into the same kind of situation as her. I decided to keep Brett a secret. She didn't need to know, right? When I went home for Christmas vacation, I missed Brett so much, but I couldn't let my mom know about him. So I'd wait until she went to bed before calling him. One night, she caught me, though. She must have gone to the bathroom, and suddenly I heard footsteps. She was standing right there. I didn't know how much she heard, but I was so embarrassed. I thought she'd grab the phone from me and tell me off, but instead, she just walked back to bed. It was so weird. In the morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table grinning and said, "Well, who is he then? Invite him over. Don't be shy." I couldn't believe it. I thought she'd freak out, but instead she wanted to meet him. She suggested we invited him over for dinner, as my aunt was also coming over that night. My mom and my aunt were like best friends, and had basically raised me together, so I was excited for her to meet Brett too. He took the bus that afternoon, as he was desperate to see me, and my mom said he could stay in the spare room. As soon as my mom saw Brett, she grinned at me and whispered how handsome he was. Then we sat down to dinner and started chatting. My mom had so many questions for him, and it was a bit awkward. She wouldn't shut up, and it made her seem so nosy. She asked where he'd grown up, and what his mom and dad did, and even asked for their names and stuff. Meanwhile, my aunt just sat there quietly, and then at one point she got up from the table and went out into the garden. My mom ran after her, and Brett looked at me worried. I had no idea what was wrong. 10 minutes later, my mom came in and her expression had totally changed. She went from being warm and friendly to totally strict and cold. She looked at both Brett and I and said she decided I was far too young to have a boyfriend staying over, and then asked Brett to leave. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was 20 years old. She was being so rude. So I said to her, "Mom, why? Please, can he just stay?" I was almost begging her, but she looked so serious and firm, and I knew she wasn't going to change her mind. Brett was even more shocked than me. I mean, it had been my mom who'd invited him in the first place, and now there she was, shooing him away. He quickly grabbed his stuff and ordered a taxi. I was so upset I didn't even say bye to him. I just burst into tears and felt so angry at my mom. Right after Brett left, I ran upstairs and locked myself in my room, and my mom stood on the other side begging to speak to me. She said there was something she needed to tell me. I refused to come out and instead sat on the floor on the other side of the door. I could hear my mom crying and knew this was serious. She said the reason she didn't want Brett to stay was because he was actually my half-brother. No, I didn't understand. I asked if my dad was also Brett's dad, and then I got angry. I thought my mom hadn't known who my dad was. I opened the door and I was about to start shouting at her when she told me what was really going on. I'd been adopted. Well, actually, I'd been kidnapped by my aunt when I was born. It's a long, shocking story, but basically my biological parents were this rich couple, but they were struggling to get pregnant. My biological mom had a best friend called Ashley, who she told everything to, but Ashley secretly had a crush on my dad. She seduced my dad until one night they slept together, and Ashley ended up getting pregnant. My dad was so happy and promised Ashley he'd help raise the baby, but that he couldn't divorce my mom. This made Ashley angry. She wanted my dad all to herself and wanted their kid to become the heir to his company. At the same time, my biological mom fell pregnant with me, and when my dad found out, he quickly forgot about Ashley and tried to forget about the mistake he'd made that one night. This, of course, made Ashley even more angry, but she still pretended to be friends with my mom. When my mom went into labor with me, my dad was away on a business trip, and Ashley paid someone to sneak into the hospital and kidnap me. That person turned out to be my aunt. She did it because she was desperate for cash, so she snuck in, dressed up as a nurse, and in the middle of the night stole me away. But she wasn't cold-blooded enough to just throw me away or leave me at an orphanage. So she took me to her sister's place and told her that she'd found me abandoned on the street. Her sister, who had never wanted to get married but had always wanted to be a mom, was so happy and decided to raise me. But then a few days later, it was all over the news, a missing baby. There was an exact description of what I'd been wearing, and even a photo of me just after I'd been born. There was no denying that I was the missing baby. My new mom confronted my aunt about it and found out the truth. My aunt said there was no way they could return me as my aunt had already spent all the money she'd been paid to cover some debts. And she didn't want to go to prison, so they decided to raise me as if I really was their own. That secret would still have been hidden from me if I hadn't brought Brett home. My mom was so shocked that I'd brought my dad and Ashley's son into her home and introduced him to her as my boyfriend. As my mom told me all of this, I just sat there frozen. This was absolutely unbelievable. I felt sick. They'd lied to me all these years, and even worse, my boyfriend was actually my half-brother. My whole life was one big mess. "I hate you, Mom, and I hate you too," I said to my aunt. "You helped that evil monster Ashley get what she wanted, and now you've ruined my life and taken away my family." My mom reached out to hug me, but I didn't want her near me. We both just sat there crying. She tried to calm me down and get me to relax. Then she sighed and said, "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Your whole life I've been trying to make it up to you. I thought my love for you would be enough. As for Ashley, well, I heard she didn't get what she wanted in the end." "Wait, why? I don't understand. But she successfully kidnapped me, right?" I wiped my tears and looked at her. "Yes, sweetie, but her main goal was to become your dad's wife. But that obviously didn't happen." Then she continued. "After my aunt had kidnapped me, Ashley had given birth to Brett, and was so happy thinking that my parents no longer had a baby, and that my dad would now leave my mom and go live with her. But that's not what happened. Yes, their dear daughter was taken away, but my dad still stayed with my mom and loved her even more. My dad didn't get together with Ashley, but apparently my dad had still been helping raise Brett until now. There's definitely no bad blood between them because I've heard Brett talk about his dad quite a lot. Now there was only one thing for it. I had to find my biological parents and find out the rest of the story. They deserved to know I was alive. But now, what would I do about Brett? I'd have to break up with him somehow. Hi, it's me, Diane again. In the first part of my story, I've told you about how I found out my boyfriend Brett was actually my half-brother when I once brought him home to introduce him to my mom, who also wasn't even my real mom. I was seriously upset with my mom and my aunt. I loved them both so much, but they've been lying to me my whole life. Imagine how hurt I must have been. Now with the fact that my dad was also Brett's dad, of course it was wrong to keep dating him. So, one day we met on our college campus, and I told him I wanted to break up with him. It was so horrible to break his heart like that, but the truth would be much, much worse. Part of me really wanted to tell him because then I could meet my real parents, but then Brett would really suffer. Obviously, Brett didn't take the breakup well. He called me so many times and even came to my house begging to get me back. Even though he knew my mom didn't want him there, I completely avoided him, as I felt like if I saw him, I'd just want to be with him again. I ended up taking a semester off college to sort my head out. It wasn't just to avoid Brett, though. I had another reason, too. I noticed that my biological parents' company was hiring a finance intern. I discovered this when I was Googling them one day, and I realized I had to apply. Well, I got the job. I was so nervous to meet my parents, and on my very first day, my manager introduced me to my dad. I had to try and act as normal as possible, just like any other employee, but inside I was screaming, wishing that I could just tell him who I really was. A few days later, I finally met my mom. My colleague told me that sometimes she would come and bring her husband lunch, and as soon as I saw her, I started shaking. She handed my dad his lunch and gave him a peck on the cheek, and they looked so sweet together. I couldn't stop staring at her. And as she left, she glanced at me and smiled. Suddenly, I felt so emotional, as if I'd lost something that I'd never had. I ended up running to the bathroom and crying in secret. It was just so overwhelming. When my birthday rolled around, my colleagues organized a small birthday party for me at the office. My mom and dad joined us to congratulate me and even sang happy birthday to me. I kept looking at my mom and noticed there were tears in her eyes. I knew that was because my birthday was the same date that she lost me, her only child. If only she knew I was standing there right in front of her. That night when I got home, I saw that my mom and aunt had also prepared a surprise birthday for me. It made me even more emotional because I thought back over all the years. It didn't matter how busy they both were. They always threw me a party. Inside, I felt like I was going crazy. I felt so torn between emotions for both my biological and adoptive family. I don't know why, but I decided that was the right moment to tell my mom and aunt about my decision to meet my real parents. Don't worry, I'll never leave both of you. And aunt, I'll never tell them you were the kidnapper, I said. After that, both my mom and aunt were crying and thanked me for promising not to leave them, and even offered to help me get my parents back, which just made me cry too. You're probably wondering about Brett. Well, one day I was in the elevator, and all of a sudden the doors opened, and Brett was standing right there with my dad. I wanted to run away, but I had to face him. I quickly said, "Oh, hey, long time no see, Brett. I work here now. What are you doing here?" My dad looked at us confused, and I pretended not to know that the two of them were father and son. So he explained, "Diane, this is my dad. You must have known him from working together. Dad, this is my, ex-girlfriend Diane. I've mentioned her to you," he said. Then my dad complimented me and said I was a great girl at work and that he was sorry it hadn't worked out for us. Brett looked at me sadly then. I told him I had work to do and rushed off. You see, I was solely focused on revealing myself to my parents and didn't want anything to distract me, but it was going to be tough now that my dad knew I was Brett's ex. But thankfully, my aunt had found out something about Ashley that I could use. That night, my aunt came to my room and told me that she'd been researching Ashley. She was afraid that Ashley would start bothering me if she found out I was trying to get back to my family. Turns out my aunt was friends with a close friend of Ashley, the same friend who helped Ashley hire my aunt to kidnap me. So my aunt met up with her to ask about Ashley, and she told my aunt that Ashley was married and had a daughter. As for her son, Brett, ever since he was a child, she'd just given him to his dad's family, aka my parents. So then my aunt went to Ashley's house. She spotted her going somewhere with some friends and followed her. She overheard Ashley bragging about her daughter, and then her one friend said, "Oh, Ashley, you're so lucky to have two amazing kids." But Ashley just laughed and said, "Oh, Brett, that boy is so stubborn. He's not like me at all. He must get his personality from his dad, whoever his dad might be." To be honest, till this day, I still don't know and don't even bother to know. My aunt couldn't believe what she was hearing. So she asked her friend about it, and then, yes, another shocking truth came out. My dad wasn't even Brett's dad. Back then, Ashley had slept with a few random men to try and get pregnant. Then she tricked my dad into thinking the baby was his, so he'd take responsibility and divorce his wife. However, that didn't work out. But still, she kept the lie going and handed Brett over to my parents just so Brett could inherit my parents' company. OMG! Ashley was such a monster. She had fooled so many people. All I wanted was to expose her, but my aunt said we didn't have valid evidence yet. So I told my aunt I'd find a way to get some DNA samples from Brett and my dad. Firstly, I asked Brett to meet at a cafe and apologized for my ghosting behavior. I hoped he'd understand and we could be on good terms. To my complete surprise, he confessed that he was still in love with me. In my mind, I thought, I still love you too. I just wished this all would be over soon and we could get back together. As we were saying goodbye, we hugged, and I quickly grabbed a hair that had fallen on his shoulder. With my dad, I managed to find some of his facial hair on his razor in the bathroom by his office. But as I walked out, I saw there was a kid's drawing on his wall that was signed by Brett. It was nothing special, but it really made me feel bad. Clearly, my dad loved Brett so much and was so proud of him. I didn't want to ruin this for them. And sure enough, the DNA results were as expected. Brett was not my dad's son. But I was so hesitant to expose the truth. I worried that my parents' feelings for Brett would change. If they knew that I were their daughter and Brett wasn't actually related to them by blood, maybe they'd just abandon him. And with me and Brett's relationship, they might never accept it. So, in the end, we might all lose someone we love. A son to them, a lover to me, and a family to Brett. If I kept everything hidden, maybe Brett and I could get back together, and I could just see my parents that way. That would be so much better for everyone, right? And it was. Brett ended up joining the company too, and I could tell he wanted to get back together, so everything was going according to plan. But one day, Brett, my dad, and I were having lunch together, and Ashley stormed in. Right in front of us, she started yelling at my dad, saying that he was mistreating Brett by only giving him an intern's job. Brett quickly jumped up and explained that it was his own choice, but Ashley was furious. She shamelessly asked my dad to give her and her new family more money, including school fees for her daughter. She was basically blackmailing my dad. She said that because in the past she'd handed over her son to my parents out of pity, that they'd lost their child, aka me, so she thought it was okay to demand more money from him. My dad didn't reply to her, and Brett was so angry and embarrassed by his mom's behavior, he told her to stop and basically dragged her out of there. I was almost as angry as Brett. How could Ashley do this? I quickly excused myself and left my dad there all alone. By a twist of fate, I bumped into Ashley again. After work, I went to buy some sunscreen, and when it was my turn to pay, I felt someone push me from behind. Then the person said, "I'm in a rush. Let me go first. I've got my money ready." And yeah, it was none other than Ashley. And the money she was holding was probably the money from my dad. Clearly, it wasn't for her daughter's school fees then. She didn't recognize me and didn't even realize she made me drop my purse. But just before I grabbed it, she got there first. And of course, there was a photo inside of me, my mom, and my aunt from when I was just a baby. As soon as she picked it up, her face changed. She seemed to realize my aunt and suddenly realized who I was. Oh my God, I never expected that I'd have to confront Ashley in this way. Would she do something bad to me now? Hi, it's me again, Diane. In part 2 of my story, I started to work in my parents' company, but I didn't have the courage to tell them the truth that I was their long-lost daughter. Fortunately, one day, I found out that Brett, my boyfriend, wasn't my half-brother, and that his mom, Ashley, had been lying this whole time. But I didn't want to unveil the truth because I didn't want Brett to get hurt. That was until the day I bumped into Ashley. In the store, I watched as she looked at the photo of me and my mom and aunt from when I was just a baby, and the look of recognition on her face as she realized my aunt was the kidnapper she hired nearly 20 years ago. She looked at me terrified. Are you that baby? Are you also the one I saw in the company earlier this afternoon? What are you doing with Brett and his dad there? Did you know everything? She shot questions at me and didn't even wait for my response. Instead, she just started yelling at me. claiming that I was plotting to get revenge on her for stealing my life away from me. I knew it was pointless trying to explain to her, so I said nothing and watched as she ran out of the store without buying anything. The next day when I got to the company, I found out that Brett had suddenly disappeared. He hadn't come to work, and no one could get in touch with him. My dad told me that he'd gone to see his mom the night before, and after that, he hadn't come home. Oh my God, his mom! After he'd bumped into me, had she done something bad to him? I couldn't bear it. My aunt had given me Ashley's address, so I went there to find out what was going on. As soon as she opened the door, I asked her where Brett was, and she just smirked at me and said she told him I was his half-sister and that I was preparing to kick him out of my dad's family. So she said he must have run away because he was so disgusted by me. I felt so angry I wanted to scream. Ashley was ruining everything. She even said to me, "You can't fool me. It's no coincidence that you're working in your dad's company and that you've seduced Brett. You're doing all of this on purpose." Well, that just made me even angrier. I said to her, "I know Brett isn't my dad's son. I did a DNA test, and you're lucky I haven't said anything to either of them, but I will now. You better prepare yourself for the consequences." Then I left, leaving her standing there looking angry. I went straight to my parents' house to tell them before Ashley could beat me there to tell them lies. They let me in straight away and asked me what was going on and if it was about Brett. I nodded and took out all the evidence I'd prepared. This was the moment of truth. I was so nervous. I gave them the DNA results of Brett and my dad, then the baby photo of me, and then a letter my aunt had written confessing about how Ashley had hired her to kidnap me. My parents were shocked, of course, and had a lot of questions, but soon it all became clear and we all started crying. It was just so overwhelming. I even told them about what Ashley had told Brett the night before and begged them to believe me that I didn't do it all on purpose. Of course they said they believed me, and I was relieved. But the very next day, you won't believe what Ashley told them. My parents went straight to Ashley's the next day to confront her, and she couldn't deny it because there was so much evidence. But then she told my parents that she had been feeling so guilty, so she was the one who'd gotten in touch with my aunt and encouraged her to tell me the truth and then help me find my parents. After my parents told me this, I told them Ashley was lying. She was trying to make herself look like an angel when she was none other than the devil. I suggested to my parents we sue her or something, and then a few days later, Ashley got in touch with me. She'd found out where I lived, and as soon as I let her in, she begged me not to sue her. She'd obviously already received a warning letter from my parents' lawyer. She said she had a family to care for and didn't want them to know about her past. Then she promised me she'd never come near me or my family again. I was sick of her now and asked her to leave. But then she apologized again, and she really regretted everything she told Brett, and that she'd gone to see him. "What? Where did you find him?" I asked. And she told me that she found him at her parents' house, where she and Brett had lived when he was little before she'd gotten married. Oh, that's right. I knew Brett loved his grandparents so much and often visited them. I hadn't even thought that that was where he could be. Then she told me that Brett hadn't disappeared because he was disgusted by me. It was because he felt so guilty about everything that had happened. She told me she'd already gone to see him and confessed because she wanted to at least be seen as an honest mother in her son's eyes. After I told Brett that he isn't your dad's son, he got so angry and shouted at me that he hated me and never wanted to see me again. It crushed me. Ashley told me and started to cry. "Please forgive me, Diane," she continued. "I've lost Brett. Surely that's punishment enough for everything I've done. I thought that what I did would help Brett so he could grow up in a wealthy family. But turns out all I did was hurt the people around me, especially Brett." Can you guess what I did next? I went to meet my parents and asked them to remove all accusations against Ashley. You're probably wondering why I changed my tune so quickly. Well, I felt like enough revenge had already happened, and I couldn't bear anyone suffering anymore. All I'd ever wanted was to have a peaceful life, and revenge only satisfies us for a second. It doesn't make us happy in the long term. After that, Ashley came to apologize to my parents, and swore she'd completely disappear from our life after that. Then she gave us Brett's grandparents' address, and asked us not to put any blame on Brett. Then she left. Poor Brett. When I went to meet him, it was clear he was the one who'd been hurt most by all of this. His grandparents told me that after Ashley had revealed the truth to him, he'd lock himself up in his room and hadn't come out. I knocked on his door and begged him to let me in. After a while, he opened the door, and I couldn't believe how he looked. He'd become so skinny, and his eyes were so sad. It made me so upset to see him like this. He said to me that he blamed himself for everything. For the big lie my life had been, for my parents' loss of their only child, and for the way we'd broken up. He truly believed all of this was because of him and his mom. I hugged him and told him none of this was his fault, and I asked him to come back to my parents' house because we all missed him so much. He eventually agreed, but I could see he was nervous, especially when both my parents knew that Brett wasn't related to them by blood. But my parents welcomed him back into the house. However, I could see they were feeling a bit awkward about what to say, so I stood up and said to them, "Even though you guys aren't actually related, you've still been so happy together. Just like my adoptive mom, she ended up getting a daughter she might never have had, and you got a son that brought you so much joy. Sure, there were lots of lies, but we were still happy, right?" Believe it or not, everything worked out after that. Brett and I went back to school, and we've both decided to go work at my parents' company after graduation. I have chosen to move in with my parents, but of course, I still visit my adoptive mom and aunt all the time. My adoptive mom understands that this is important for me, so that I can get to know my parents properly and catch up on lost time. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. I asked my parents to forgive my adoptive mom and aunt, because even though they acted wrongly in the past, they still raised me and did such an amazing job. As for Brett, he moved out into his own place, but still visits my parents all the time. However, Brett and I are no longer dating. It wasn't because of my parents, though. Let's be honest, it would just be too weird if we kept dating after everything we'd been through. It was a hard decision for us both, but it's for the best. We both need to move on so that we can have a better future. And hey, at least we can still be friends, and soon, colleagues too.